particularly with the government um, source of your interest in this space. I find it really interesting. I mean, when you're looking at partners and when you're looking at open source and partners, you can do things and have a partner do something for you. You can drive something in an open source community and have that partner pick it up and sell it to you and support it for you, but it was a feature that you wanted. So the spectrum of things that can be done with regard to partnership and your ability to drive the things that you want to drive with that partner or your vendor, or in some sense, when you have customers, and if you think of Defense Unicorn, there's this three-way relationship that exists where normally it's just, vendor customer and you're working something out. There's this now thing that's a community that gives you another entry point to have conversations, gain allies, to do dual use as an example, because dual use, open source projects are looking for dual use in a sense, right? Because the broader the community, the more people are doing things to scratch their own itch that ultimately serve the core as well, the better everybody is, right? And so that's, in some sense, that's also dual use. So can you talk about your learnings about, how did that manifest for you? How did you start to figure these things out, and how did you use that, right, as yet another lever to be able to have these relationships where the community was part of them? Somewhat of a complex question, I know, but give me your thoughts there.
Yeah, I'll start by saying I didn't realize when I was a government program manager how much I was viewed as like a cash register walking around on vendor floors. Yeah, I got a lot more attention then than I do now, which is a good thing to me. But I bring that up because the government is a unique space. They have career fields dedicated to what they call acquisitions, which are people who acquire things on behalf of the government, contracting program managers and engineers in particular. And I bring that up because I went through 11 years of on and off training from the government on how to acquire things for them. And there's this thing called the Federal Acquisition Regulation, the FAR. It's, I think, 1,800 pages of legal documents on how to effectively contract. Like, what are the rules? Because we are basically giving government taxpayer dollar, right? Like all the money the government spends has been cycled through from our own income tax and whatever else. And so I bring that up because the government has no idea how to buy open source. I would say the average person doesn't know how to buy open source. And so this topic comes up and you're like, there's nothing in the rule book that I've learned that ever speaks to this directly. So now you're like trying to translate, federal regulation interpretation to vendors who have never worked with the government. And you're like, you feel like you're speaking Chinese and English to each other, even though you're in theory speaking the same language. And I would say the other part I'll add to that is like the government, I don't want to simplify it too much, but I feel like they need to do one thing, and that's like award really big contracts to traditional primes. And I'm not ever trying to say that's a bad thing, because there's a reason that it has fallen to that, and that works in a lot of cases because it does. But what I would say is the prime contractors, and if for people not familiar with that term, that's the Lockheeds, the Northrops, the Boeings, the General Atomics, and I'm going to miss some. And if people watch this that work at those companies are going to be offended I left them out, and I don't mean to do that. But there's a handful of companies who are massive who do this, like that is their business. They and the government know how to work together, but those companies came along in what I'll call like the manufacturing era, right? Like they learned how to do business with the government and how they like to do business in a way where I like to say they bend metal for a living, right? At the end of the day, they know how to like create manufacturing lines to build a jet, to build a submarine, to build a satellite. And that's a very, very, very hard job to do. But there's some systems being built now that don't have any of that, right? They still need an integrator to a large degree, but they're integrating different supply chains of purely software, sometimes running in a cloud that you can't see, right? Like you can't walk out to the assembly line and check how things are coming off, like physically, like people got used to that, right? And so I only bring that up again, not to say one is better, good or bad. They're just different models. And unfortunately, the defense space, in my opinion, at the time when I was in, was still just teaching you how to like work with people who are building assembly lines and building integration that way. And I think what we were in the throes of change, in the time that I was in, was like, how do we shift this model, this giant system that is the Department of Defense, to understanding like, hey, if I'm building a command and control center, It's a bunch of signal input into a massive data center, interpreting that data, making a decision, shipping information back out. Nobody's building a jet, right? We're not doing that. I mean, there's a lot of people who build servers, a lot of people who build software, and now all of a sudden it's like it's a completely different paradigm on who you work with and how you contract. And I think that was the hard part is finding contracting officers who are allowed to sign contracts with partners and convincing them that like there's a different way that we should partner. Because as I've learned now at Defense Unicorns, we have some venture backing now. And I only bring that up because in that conversation, we had to translate government sales and contracts to people who are expected to see enterprise SaaS type returns, multiples, reporting. And honestly, as I looked back on it when I was in government, it was kind of the same conversation, but in reverse. I was talking to companies who wanted to see specific annual recurring revenue license support structure on their end to convince their people that they should take the deal, even right to work with the government. And I had to convince the government on the other side that, hey, this contract structure that looks different is okay. Like it's safe. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to measure value. Here's how we structure milestones and deliveries. Here's how we evaluate earned value. Right? The worlds don't speak to each other. And going back to this concept of understanding business, like if you can't make that translation, there is no dual investment because both parties, not for better or worse, just can't talk to each other. They don't understand each other's incentives.